This word in your ear, Mark, is brought to you thanks to NordVPN.
I know what you're going to ask me. You're going to ask me what VPN means.
But just
I
imagine
now know this,
was
and
gonna
I'm
ask
confident to tell you that it's a virtual private network.
Say that again, Mark.
It's virtual private network.
And what is that, Mark? It's a way to keep your data safe on the internet whenever you're logging in, either at home or, as I've just been, abroad. VPN protects your identity and encrypts your data so that nobody can steal that identity. And at the same time, there's a fun side to it. It enables you to access the internet via servers in more than 50 different countries.
And you have been abroad recently. I'm suspecting you put this VPN concept to some kind of rigorous investigation.
I did, actually. It means that if you're on holiday in Italy, as I was, but you wish to avail yourself of the peerless services of Swedish Netflix, which I did, you can do that. You can sidestep the region restrictions, which often govern what films can be streamed in different countries. And what did I take advantage of on this particular occasion?
Go on, tell me.
What did I want to watch in Italy? What was I suddenly struck by the desperate desire to see? I wanted to see Alastair Sim in the 1954 film, The Belles of St Trinian.
Oh, my Lord, yes.
Which is just fantastic. And I don't know why you can't get it on Netflix in the UK, but you can get it on Netflix.
You have to go to Italy to see it.
No, Sweden. You can see it in Sweden, but you can watch it in Italy from Sweden.
Yeah.
And there I was, wondering at the majesty of Alastair Sim in full drag, playing the head teacher, of course, of St Trinian's, which, as you'll be aware, is a school full of ne'er-do-well young ladies, isn't it? Really.
It is.
And the younger part of whom charge around the school having fights with hockey sticks, don't they?
It's Minnie the Minx and Beryl the Peril, really.
Minnie the Minx and Beryl the Peril.
With knee-high white socks.
Well, and then when you get to the older group of pupils, the sixth formers or whatever, they rarely enter a room without the sound of a frowsy saxophone. Announcing that they're
like trouble ahead.
Their sex bomb
ready
to explode.
Yeah.
There's loads of stocking tops in evidence.
Yeah.
And these girls spend all their time smoking, running a casino, and tearing off to town in open-top sports cars with reprobates like Terry Thomas.
Of course.
And it's the kind of thing...
Absolute shower.
You cannot imagine it even being allowed to think about it nowadays.
No, they wouldn't make that film.
But the really strange thing about this film is, despite all that, it is, I put to you, Mark Ellen, strangely innocent. Oddly
probably.
That film, you can kind of watch it without getting any of the kind of subtext at all.
There's none of that ghastly free soul. No, you're probably safe with Terry. You're probably a safe pair of hands. I don't know.
Yeah. So there you go. The Belles of St Trinian is what I've been watching. So via NordVPN, you can take advantage of a deal where you can try NordVPN by going to nordvpn.com/yourear or just using the code YourEar to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and one additional month for free and a bonus gift. And it's risk-free because there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Full details, as ever, in the show notes below.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
So, Mark, we've both been on holiday, and we return, no doubt, to find that we've missed lots of goings-on in the febrile worlds of both rock and pop, and probably some pressing correspondence from the masses.
There is. This just in, and it's white hot today. It's so up our street. It's brilliant. And I think it proves that things may come and things may go, but the art school dance goes on forever. This is from one of our listeners, Mike Shuttleworth of Brunswick. And Mike writes and says, I wonder if any of you can shed any light on the band Dando Shaft. I love this, who cropped up this week via my excellent record seller. They had her album out in 1971. Do you have any memories of this band, and might you share it with the listeners? Did either of you see them in the day? I can't say I did. Did you?
I did.
You're kidding me.
I did.
You're kidding.
I saw them on some
You
bill
saw The Shaft.
The Shaft.
The Shaft.
Probably in between Tiernanog and, I don't know.
That's amazing.
Whatever. Yeah, I did see them. I'd be lying if I said I can remember a great deal.
Sort of psychedelic prog jazz folk group.
Well, the kind of thing that we didn't realise at the time was psychedelic folk, or folkadelica, or whatever people call it nowadays. And I mean, it is kind of interesting that this stuff just passed without note, and I mean, literally without note in 1970.
And now highly collectible. Yeah.
And it also ties in with what I think we were saying a couple of weeks ago before we went on holiday, which is that the whole kind of scene around records has totally changed. People don't get in touch with you and say, have you heard the new so-and-so?
No.
They get in touch with you and say, have you heard a thing which came out in 1972, which I've just heard? Because
but also it has some value being our ancient age as well, because we might have actually seen them. Do you know what I mean? There was a long time when I used to tell people I'd seen Bob Marley and the Wailers, and I stopped saying I'd seen Bob Marley and the Wailers. It made out that I was a certain age. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's very attractive that you've been around as long as we have.
And so who is it? You've got the email in front of you.
I have. This is a guy called Mike Shuttleworth.
Mike points out that they didn't really make it, but he also points out that he points out a fact at the same time that I think may be connected with the reason that they didn't make it. They were on the Neon label, and the Neon label was the progressive imprint of, wait for it, RCA Records.
Oh, right.
And I think this is interesting because round about this time, 69, 70, 71, 72, all the labels, the British labels, realised they could no longer rely on getting American stuff to release, and that they had to start generating their own. And they couldn't get, very often, acts signed to them because they were seen as old and fuddy-duddy. They had Decca, the label of the Rolling Stones, EMI, the label of the Beatles. They were seen as old and fuddy-duddy. So all these labels suddenly started sprouting progressive imprints, didn't they? Most famously, EMI started Harvest, which signed millions of bands, most of whom did nothing at all. But Pink Floyd.
It all had the right vibe.
All had the right vibe. Now, I'm going to take you through a little bit
albums or whatever. Yeah,
little bit of a quiz here, Mark. What was the progressive imprint of the Philips label? I'm
not going to be able to tell you that.
It's Vertigo.
Vertigo.
So Philips was the very kind of, passé label of, the Walker Brothers and so forth, And so they had to have Vertigo in order to be able to get Black Sabbath.
Yeah, with the
Status Quo and all that kind of thing. Do you remember the
revolving label? Oh, God, it was fantastic. You used to stare at it for hours. Do you remember the concentric circle?
Certainly do. Do you remember the progressive imprint of Pi Records?
Is that going to be, let me think now. It's not Charisma, that was an independent, wasn't it?
No, Charisma was an independent. It was Dawn.
Okay.
Dawn, and on the Dawn label you found such stellar acts as Titus Groan, as Comus, as Demon Fuzz, and as Atomic Rooster, which are really the best known of them.
Who I saw several times. I'd like to have seen Demon Fuzz, though, I have to say.
So anyway, I knew so little. I know an awful lot about 70s rock and roll and so forth, but I had to go and really look around to find the other acts who were on the Neon label from RCA, and they were as follows, Mark Allen. Here we go. Fairweather. Do you remember Fairweather?
No, I don't.
They were Andy Fairweather.
Oh, I was going to say, was it Andy Fairweather?
It was Andy Fairweather. It was him moving on from Amen Corner to try and present himself as a kind of prog.
Bright-eyed and legless, yeah.
They had Indian Summer. They had Chris McGregor's Brotherhood of Breath. They had Tonton Macoute. And they had Keith Tippett's Centipede. Do you remember Keith Tippett? No, sorry, this is serious.
I remember Keith Tippett fondly.
Keith Tippett's Centipede. Didn't Keith Tippett marry Julie Driscoll?
He did.
He did.
No, was that Brian Auger? No, it was Keith Tippett.
Keith Tippett. And Keith Tippett, it was a jazzer, really. But, this was the time when people were all sorts of crossing over one way or the other.
Yeah.
And what was the point about Keith Tippett's Centipede, Mark? What can you make out from the name of the group? What was their characteristic?
I suppose there were hundreds of them. They had an enormous lineup.
They had 50 members.
That's it.
If there are 50 members, they had 100 feet. There you go. Hence the name Centipede. So there you go.
That's fantastic.
That's what that's led to.
Well, can I tell you, in an idle moment, I Googled the mighty Dando Shaft, The Shaft, whose singer was a girl called Polly Bolton. And I love stories like this. I'm sorry, it's so brilliant. Turns out everything you wanted to happen happened. Polly Bolton leaves the music business in 1980 to start an organic plant nursery in South Shropshire. Of course she does. It's exactly what you want. In 1985, she's persuaded out of hiding by Ashley Hutchins to sing on his album By Gloucester Docks I Sat Down and Wept. She has since then gone back, I think mostly in the barn on her acreage in Shropshire, in the Oak Barn. She has made now a total of 10 albums. Do you think that's brilliant? I love that kind of thing. People won't let it lie, and why should they?
The Word Podcast. Prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
So we both had holidays with members of our family, didn't we? Kind of extended family.
In blazing heat.
In blazing heat in different parts of Europe. But you presumably had evenings sitting around the table, finishing off a bottle of wine, or possibly the second bottle of wine in the company of your children, and did in the course of those delightful occasions, did you learn anything about your children that you didn't know before? Well, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to tell you what I learned about mine. Is that one of them made a confession, and then another one said, "Yes, I've done that as well." And then another one said, "Yes, I've done that as well." And then
I think you told me what this was.
The wife of another one said, "Yes, I've done that as well." With the result that my wife and I were just jaws dropping. What? Do you know what they'd all done, Mark? And this may shock you, okay? They had all Deliverooed a pudding.
That's right.
At some stage in their life, they had Deliverooed a pudding. Frankly, I was
So you finished your meal and you just think, God, I wish we had a little bit of tiramisu. So straight to the phone. Is that what happens?
That's apparently
a Honda 50 comes futting round about 5 minutes later. With a little
polluting your neighbourhood.
Polluting your neighbourhood to offload some fine, Italian cuisine.
Frankly, I was shocked.
Yeah.
Do you think yours have ever done that? Or are yours far too kind of care too much about
I don't think they have. Although that's the idea of takeaway meals. It's given me a flashback to going around to my old friend Tom Hibbert. Tom Hibbert used to write for Q and Word and Mojo and all that. And I used to go around to Tom's. And Tom and his wife can't cook, won't cook. I used to go around there. They would just open a drawer and they'd just get out a load of takeaway menus. They'd have a pizza express, they'd have fish and chips, there'd be curry, there'd be Chinese or whatever. And you decided what you wanted, and it was then rung up. And a whole series of motorbikes would then descend on their place in Parsons Green, and the food would arrive.
That was how long ago, Mark? That was 20, 30 years ago.
1990s.
Okay, it's quite a long time ago. Well, what I'm saying is, Tom, if he's listening, the world has finally gone round to Tom's point of view, hasn't it?
He was ahead of the game.
I was listening to Talk Sport this morning, first thing. This is aimed at guys who are in white vans, putting up scaffolding outside houses. That's who they are. That's their demographic. And they're flogging a kind of takeaway breakfast service. So basically, if you're halfway up a scaffolding, you just ring up and somebody turns up with the bacon sandwich and a mug of tea.
And just tosses the package up to you.
It's just absolutely extraordinary. So talking of holidays, as we were, I happened to be reading an extract from the from the much-awaited memoir of that titan of world affairs, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who's written this extraordinary self-regarding book about how he changed the destiny of the planet, which contained one little piece from when he and Ivanka went on holiday, which I felt I ought to share with people.
Go on.
And this is how it goes. He's talking about when they were in France. He says, on that Sunday, we were having lunch at Bono's house. Just absorb that for a moment, would you, ladies and gentlemen? They're having lunch at Bono's house.
So already it's just ridiculous. Really.
This is Jared Kushner.
I know.
Ivanka Trump and
Ivanka
Bono.
Trump.
You might want to get out a piece of paper and a pen to write down some of the names I'm going to fling at you in the next 30 seconds. They're having lunch at Bono's house in the town of Eze on the French Riviera when Rupert... Now, who is Rupert? Is that
Murdoch.
Rupert the bear? Is
Rupert Murdoch.
Hind? No, that is Rupert Murdoch. Okay, Rupert stepped out to take a call. Okay, so we got Ivanka Trump, we have Jared Kushner, we have Bono, we have Rupert Murdoch. This is not Stella Street. This is apparently real. Okay, he came back and whispered in my ear. This is Rupert. They blinked. They agreed to our terms. We have the Wall Street Journal. See, they bought the Wall Street Journal. And I don't mean they bought a copy of the Wall Street Journal. I mean they bought the
whole
Wall Street
thing,
Journal.
hook, line, and sinker.
Here we go. Get out your pen again. After lunch, Billy Joel, who had also been with us on the boat, played the piano.
This is Stella Street, isn't it? Just coming out of a doorway. It's a farce, actually, isn't it? Billy Joel, and with him there was somebody else, presumably.
Well, while Bono sang, he played the piano while Bono sang with the Irish singer-songwriter Bob Geldof.
Fantastic.
That's such a clanky bit of expression, isn't it? The Irish
singer-songwriter.
singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
Listen, Bob Geldof is many things. He's not the Irish singer-songwriter. He's bloody Bob Geldof.
Bob Geldof, I think he's extremely well known.
He's pretty well known. And, if he's not well known, calling him the Irish singer-songwriter is not going to make him any well known. But no. So anyway, that's my paragraph. And I'm just saying how the other half live.
I love it. But isn't this is just celebrities, isn't it? That celebrities are as fascinated by celebrities as we are, obviously. But being celebrities, they get to meet them. And there's a bit in Chrissie Hynde's memoir, I think, where they had this competition where the Pretenders are making an album in the studio to see who could come back from a party to the studio and bring a celebrity with them. And she wins because she brings along Jeff Beck. It's that whole thing about, just people are just magnetically attracted to the idea of other famous people. And also you wonder, what's the pecking order? Because the pecking order has to a level has to establish itself.
I'll tell you what the pecking order is.
So is it money or is it fame?
It is, Mark. I'm going to interrupt you. The pecking order is quite clearly money. It's got to be money.
So if you're the billionaire, you're a far bigger deal than Bono.
Interesting point. Bono is a very successful rock star for a long time. Bob Geldof, very successful. Billy Joel, really successful. Rupert Murdoch could buy and sell the lot of them. And they are very aware of that, And...
Because they're all talking about whether or not they can afford to buy a Picasso, and he's talking about whether or not you can afford to buy Twitter or whatever. So you're in a different league, aren't you?
This is private jet money. This is a totally different thing. And I think it's something that's happened in popular music in the last 30 years that didn't really happen before then, is that, if you want a reason why people keep touring, and the perennial question is, surely they've got enough money. Nobody's ever got enough money.
No, because you're going to meet somebody who's just slightly better off than you. It's Mr. Toad.
Not just slightly. Not just
canary-coloured cart.
An awful lot. It's really funny. We've both been reading Jann Wenner's autobiography, Like a Rolling Stone, which we recorded an interview with him this week, which will be with you in a couple of weeks' time. And one of the things that intrigued me about the book is I think it's David Geffen when he takes his first trip on a private jet. When Jann Wenner came from a kind of quite comfortable background, knew his way around and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's the late 70s or something. He goes on a private jet with Jann Wenner. with David Geffen, the record mogul, and even he's kind of impressed.
It's Toad Hall. I want one of these.
No, but hold on a second. Before that, Geffen says to him, apparently jokingly, you'll find the trip's paid for. It's a business expense. It's a tax write-off. And of course, that's the truth.
Yeah.
If you're David Geffen and you want to fly to Australia and it's going to cost however much,
you can invent some reason why you've got a meeting.
If you take the owner of Rolling Stone with you,
yeah.
There's nobody in the world could argue that isn't a legitimate business expense.
Yeah.
You know. So that's one of the reasons that Jann Wenner just keeps getting invited to more planes, that they can just write the whole thing off as expenses. But
Jann Wenner's book is just, I mean, there is clunking name dropping all the way through. Although actually it doesn't feel like name dropping. All his pals, isn't it? You know, Mick Jagger, Bono, Springsteen, Dylan. You know, there's just a great line in it. I remember when I think the chapter's called something like Yoko and the Gorbachevs. And he's going to Russia for this meeting, and with all sorts of people. Yoko Ono, he's sitting behind Yoko Ono and the Gorbachevs. And he said, "The week began with my birthday dinner. Mick bought me a set of caviar spoons." And you just think, that's fantastic. That's set the tone, isn't it? That's raised the bar.
He's so thoughtful, isn't he, Mick?
He is.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
I don't wish to blow smoke up your fundament, Mark Ellen, but Mark Ellen years ago said something to be very wise about newspapers, which I regularly quote, actually.
Really?
Yeah, well, because I always believe that the key thing about newspapers is really successful newspapers have a really sure sense of the prejudices of their readers. They know what their readers don't like, okay? So that's why the Sun, the Mail and the Guardian are the strongest newspapers in the UK. And you always used to say about the Guardian that the editorial position of the Guardian was, you know that thing you really like? It's shit. Which I was thinking there's no better way of putting it. You know that thing over there that you're getting pleasure from? Well, you really shouldn't be, you know. And so in line with that, I've just been sent a thing for the New York Times. I'm a subscriber to the New York Times. Yeah. And they've got an opinion piece today which they're flagging up. And the headline of the opinion piece is, Mark, maternal instinct is a myth. Maternal instinct is a myth. Now, I'm saying, if you found scientific proof of that, for the sake of the happiness for humanity, keep it to yourself, okay? Are you going to make anybody in the world happier by getting them to believe that?
You're not.
You're not at all. You know what I mean? You know, what are the things that we believe in? You know, clean air, and, fresh air and mother love. You know what I mean? These are the things that matter to us, aren't they?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? And suddenly somebody at the New York Times going, I think I've found another thing that's keeping humanity going that really should be thought about more closely. So that's my case. Sorry, I just wanted to flag that up. And,
I'm sure it generates sales. There'll be a lot of people thinking, I have to discover what on earth they have to say about this. But that is appalling, isn't it?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody's going to read it to find out what they have to say about it at all. But anyway, a further piece of correspondence. This comes from Dan Richards, who's a long-time listener. Thanks for that, Dan, and thanks to everybody who's a long-time listener. And don't forget to like it and subscribe and all the normal ways that you can show your approbation, because we really do appreciate it. Dan points out he wanted to know if we're aware of what he calls the fake artist situation on Spotify. He says he plays a lot of jazz, and last year Spotify delivered him a tune on one of their curated playlists. And it's the standard Glorious Step, but it's played by a group called the Sophia Holmes Band.
Oh, yes, I read this. And then he kind of researched Sophia Holmes and could find no indication that she existed. And the whole thing is that there is just clearly... Was there not a piece, I think, in the Swedish newspaper, DN, was that right?
Yeah, it's a piece about
there was a
this.
company called Firefly that have a whole load of pseudonymous artists on Spotify. I think as many as 830 fake artists, and they're all in the kind of mood and chill out playlist area, and none of them are real. I mean, they're not real groups, they're just session musicians. And my feeling is, does that matter?
You see, I think it's an interesting point.
Does it
You know,
honestly matter?
the interesting point, Dan, is what's a fake artist? I mean, really, what's a fake artist and what's a real one? The difference is you like the real one, you don't like the fake one, or you don't feel anything for the fake one.
Yeah.
And as soon as you started to feel something for the fake one, they sort of wouldn't be fake anymore. They would be real, And this is just part of a tradition that has surfaced at regular intervals in musical history. No better example of this in the 60s and 70s. Muzak, M-U-Z-A-K,
completely.
was produced by a company called the Muzak Corporation. They hired musicians to go into studios to make recordings that were, suitable to be played in elevators.
And by definition, if you're listening to, mood or chill out, are you sitting there, exercised about the personalities of the people making that music? No, you're not. Are you?
Probably not. You're
Not
probably not.
remotely.
And, so most, I'm going to go further, Mark, most professional musicians are making music which is never really going to be listened to. It's just going to be heard in the background. Because most of the people who turn on the radio, or even in the days of records, when they used to buy records, didn't listen very closely. You know what I mean? They're not going, oh, I don't like that version of so-and-so. I much prefer so-and-so's original. They're not bothered about it. It's just something that sounds a bit like the kind of thing that they like, or that suits their mood at that moment. And they're quite happy to go along with it. So presumably the same thing happens in the world of Spotify as used to happen
And
in
also,
the world of music.
isn't it a majority of it instrumental music anyway? So, if it's got a lyric, you're being required to connect on a certain level. You're being required to connect with a thought process or something that the person singing it might be trying to put across. But if there's no lyric, then you're not necessarily as involved, are you?
No. So anyway, talking of background music, as we just briefly touched on there. Well, thanks for that, Dan. Anyway, and anybody else who's got any
Do send more emails.
do
Absolutely.
send stuff. We love to have this stuff to talk about. Because as you can imagine, if Mark and I were just stuck together, we'd
have nothing to say to each other for
things
45
would just
years.
dry up quickly.
When did we meet? My God, 1977, wasn't it? That's quite a long time ago. God. It was in 1977 on Salford University campus, wasn't it? And you were looking at you were promoting a group called Earthquake, and I was reviewing them for the Record Mirror. My God, 46 years ago. Anyway, where were we?
We have talked a fearful amount of the shit in the years. Anyway, sorry, was that? Yeah. Of all it struck me on holiday. So we drove to Italy. Great adventure. My good lady wife and myself, we drove. I'm not
Very good
flying.
fun.
Kids can fly. They can go their own way. I'm not dealing with damned airports. I don't want to deal with it. We're going to drive. We're going to make a bit of an adventure of it. We're going to stay at 3 places on the way down, and we're going to stay at the same 3 places on the way back. So we stayed in 3 kind of hotels, small hotels, big hotels, whatever. Do you know what they all had in common that rather annoyed me?
I know what you're going to say, actually. Already I can anticipate this, because it's what we suffered on our holiday too. Is it music in restaurants?
I'm going to go further. It's not just music in restaurants. It's music in hotel restaurants at one particular mealtime.
Breakfast?
At breakfast. What the hell is going on?
I mean, that's grim in itself, but it depends what it is, because if it's...
it's kind of, it's a sort of thing that hotels just play everywhere, which is kind of pop music, because they sort of feel that to play, I don't know, Percy Faith would be kind of...
So is it recognisable pop music? This is Simon Garfunkel, or is it...
No, it's not. No, that's too old, Mark. You wouldn't get a chain of hotels doing it. It's just something that kind of sounds a bit like Adele or a bit like Harry Styles or whatever, and probably isn't Adele or Harry Styles, but it's in that kind of idiom. But the point is, you don't want to hear up-tempo pop music while you're trundling around the breakfast trolley.
Nobody does.
You just don't with it. And also, do you know
But
what
the logic of that surely is it's the person sitting there having breakfast on their own. Doesn't it make them feel as though the room is a little fuller? I don't know. Because I don't think the person having breakfast on their own, now anybody eating on their own now, is remotely bothered by anything. Since what? Since the invention of the iPhone.
Yeah, that's true.
On the iPhone, you can quite simply just Google, you can muck about, and you can give the impression you're texting somebody or in touch with the outside world. You're not remotely embarrassed about being on your own. But anyway, go on.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you see Mark Ellen in the corner of a pub, leave him alone. That's what he's thinking.
The Word Podcast. 2 cocoa tins and a piece of string.
Any other business? We're joined by Alex Gold. Hello, Alex.
Hello, hello, hello.
Alex, I've just received this just in from the organisers of the Reading and Leeds festivals, and they're announcing an association with a campaign called Music Declares Emergency, which is related to a campaign about no music on a dead planet. And they're proposing various ways to make rock festivals greener, which is obviously a laudable aim. You know, one of them is apparently being able to access power via the national grid rather than taking it in there, which is presumably what they do at the moment, isn't it? And teaching people how to more sensible purchase and use of tents and so forth. But listen, you guys, you've been to more rock festivals than I have. Is the rock festival not surely the most difficult thing in the world to ever make properly green? Because basically it works on the principle that we take a load of people to a place where they don't normally live, where they don't have any other services and infrastructure, and therefore we have to provide all this.
Get them really drunk.
Get them really drunk
and expect them to behave. I mean, that's a problem.
Sell them things, and then we have to fly in bands, to kind of entertain them. Is it ever going to happen? Do you think, Mark? You've been to millions of
Well,
those.
I've been to millions. I mean, Glastonbury were trying years ago, weren't they, to kind of, firstly to clamp down on plastic bottles, which is fair enough.
Oh, of course.
Because I had a mate, my mate Ed Vollimay at The Guardian, stayed on to write a piece actually for The Guardian about clearing up after Glastonbury. This is about 15 years ago. Fantastic piece. And he said it was just days and days and days of mostly clearing up plastic bottles, and they've stopped that now. They've you're not encouraged to have plastic bottles with the refillable containers and taps and all that kind of stuff. But, the sheer mess. The biggest problem is that tents are now so cheap.
Yes.
The tent costs about, when I was a kid, a tent was very, very expensive, and you kind of had to...
You took it home with you.
Took it down with you and cleaned it and used it next time. But now, for 25 quid, you can buy a tent, you press a button, it kind of leaps into shape, you climb into it and sleep in it, and then it's so cheap, you just leave it there. And there were just billions of tents, I can remember that. So, I don't know. It's very hard, but at least they're trying. How are they going about this at Reading? What's their plan?
Well, I don't know. They're obviously raising it up the agenda, and I think that's
also Reading as a concept is the least green festival ever. It's the first festival anybody goes to. It's a kind of rite of passage.
It's 16-year-old lads.
When I was 16, I went to Reading. Everyone went to Reading. I saw Dumpy's Rusty's Nuts and Widowmaker and Matthew's Southern Comfort. And I was 16, and I think it's still the same. My kids were 16 when they went. They just came back covered in bumps on their heads because they'd been pelted with glass bottles.
Here's a way to make the Reading Festival greener at a stroke. Stop trying to attract 16-year-old blokes and aim it instead at 65-year-old women. People like my wife who really would pick up absolutely everything and take it home.
It would be cleaner when they left it when they arrived.
Absolutely,
tidy up afterwards.
So anyway, well, best of luck to them in doing it. But it does strike me as a particularly difficult thing. What's the other talking of technological innovation, Mark? What's this story about this made-up rapper? Go on.
This is a complicated story. FN Mecca. I've been following this. FN Mecca is a computer-generated rap star.
Of course.
A virtual robot rapper with, interestingly, a real vocal by a rapper called Gunner, who is currently in jail. But he is an avatar.
Tick, tick, tick.
Tick, 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 yeah. And his lyrics are created by artificial intelligence. So the Universal-owned label acknowledged that it is signed. They've now they've given up on this thing. They said they're not going to put this record out, and they have the deepest apology to the black community, because they said they didn't ask enough questions about equity and the creative process behind it. As far as I can see, what's happening, and the rap community is very unhappy about FN Mecca, because FN Mecca talks about, trivialises elements of black culture on its Instagram feed, So, and also I think the reason they're upset is that Factory New, who create this thing, are a Caucasian guy and an Asian American. So that doesn't seem to kind of to fit with it either. Yeah. But it's a really complicated story.
I do recommend.
Also ask, does it really bother people that the music, if they didn't know that FN Mecca was a kind of a fictitious, an artificial concept, would it bother them when they found out that it was? I don't know. This is a generation that grew up on computer games. It would bother us, but would it bother somebody who's 15?
Well, it doesn't bother me at all. I tell you, the thing that bothers me, reading the apology from Universal, is the most grovelling apology.
Yeah, it is.
Like, we're really sorry to anybody in the world we may have offended by this. And you're thinking, you are the biggest beast in the worldwide music business. You are the worldwide music business, effectively. Universal are the worldwide music business. And listen, the music business, throughout its 100-year or whatever history, has regularly run into controversy about all kinds of things. Only now are we in a situation where I put it to you, Mark Ellen and Alex Gold, the record business would not fight for anything at all. As soon as they get criticised, as soon as somebody pretends to be offended, they absolutely fold up like a cheap suit and run for the bloody hills. And their antecedents, you say there was controversy, obviously, Elvis Presley, there was the Sex Pistols, there was Alice Cooper, there was the Beastie Boys, there was Frankie Goes to Hollywood, there are untold scandals and, storms in various sizes of teacups over the years, most of which they just rode out with odd exception. Yeah. EMI dropping the Sex Pistols like a hot brick, but somebody else picked them up. Whereas right now, but isn't
that's surely a social media thing, because then there would have been a controversy. It would have taken ages to build and ages to spread around the globe, and now the combined impact of all of it can be felt in 35 minutes. And so you're terrified of winding up the mob.
So would any major, organ of entertainment, and here I include obviously the record companies, the film companies, the TV companies, the BBC, whatever, is there anything where they would say, we've heard what you got to say, get lost. We're going to carry on doing what we're doing, Because I just, if they keep folding like this, what's the point? You know what I mean? Because also they've taken away the space where a small operator could have done that kind of thing themselves. You know what I mean? Because traditionally, the kind of controversial and interesting, shape-shifting stuff came from the margins. It sort of doesn't anymore, really, No. It comes from these big behemoths, and they have not got the balls to back up their own, entirely laudable greed.
The word podcast. Clearly, there is no plan.
So I introduced any other business and then talked so nobody else could offer any other business. So, Alex, what have you got to say for yourself, young fella, my lad?
Well, we have a whole host of new patrons.
Hey! That's what we like.
Good.
And they are Edward Bryan.
Sorry, I missed that. Say it again.
Edward Bryan.
Good. Edward, welcome aboard.
I'll write your name in the register. Edward Bryan. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Blood group.
Alan.
Yes. Present correct.
Alan Dixon.
Hello.
Alan Dixon. Okay, I'm going to put you in alphabetical order later on and I'll read you out. Go on.
Russ Meehan.
Very good.
Very good. Any relation to Tony Meehan of the Shadows? Phil Lewis. There we go.
Peter Smith.
Peter
Very
Smith.
good, Peter Smith.
Very good to have
Good
you
to
all
see
in
ya.
the class. Yes, yeah. You'll be sitting over there.
Jeff Cordill.
Have you bought your own pencil box?
Yes, have you got it?
Yeah.
Has your mummy sent you out with no pencil
Have you got a
box?
small carton of Ribena for lunch? And some crisps.
Colin Lukens.
Colin
Very
Lucas.
good. Hello, Colin.
Okay, Colin, I'd like you to sit near me where I can keep an eye on you. Okay, carry on.
Dan Richards.
Dan
Hello,
Richards. Hello, Dan.
Dan
Okay.
Timmons.
Dan Timmons. Okay.
Good.
All the Dans.
And the following 3 patrons
Oh.
are annually subscribed. So if
Yeah,
you subscribe
good.
annually, you get a 15% discount.
Wow, Alex,
right.
that sounds like a damn good deal.
It just happens to also
Where
be
do
my
I
favourite
sign?
number, so well, you can go to patreon.com/word in your ear.
You can.
Perfect.
And-
You can. Go on.
So, you absolutely can. And there are Steve Noble,
Steve Noble.
Suzanne
Hello, Steve.
Morgan,
Suzanne Morgan. Is that right,
and
Suzanne?
Suzanne Morgan and Stephen F. Nuns.
Stephen
Okay.
F. Nuns. Okay. Very good. Well, it's very good to welcome absolutely all of you. And as I say, Mark and I have been on holiday for the last couple of weeks. While Alex has been plying his strange trade in Arctic waters and impersonating a fab.
It is rather fantastic. You think there he is drifting past glaciers every night, dressed in a Sergeant Pepper suit. That's what he does for a living. And a wig. That's what he does for a living. Very good.
I had a wonderful moment the other morning. We were sat at breakfast and there were a couple of humpback whales just tossing about the water.
I thought you'd say in
Oh.
breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, there's some whales, and then just carried on eating breakfast. And
You're in a Disney
when you get to the
cartoon.
point where yeah, completely. There's nothing about this life that is not bizarre.
Isn't there a line in Yellow Submarine where Paul says it looks like a school of whales, and Ringo says I think it's the University of Wales. It's quite good. Yeah.
Very
Sorry,
good.
I think so. Maybe wrong.
So anyway, we're getting back into gear, and as we said earlier, we recorded a chat with Jann Wenner, which will be with you in a couple of weeks' time. What else have we got coming up, Mark? In the
We've
next
got a
few
couple of
days?
people with books out next week. We've got Mickey Bereni of The Lush,
Of The
who's
Lush.
written an extraordinary book. Amazing. What a line. Half it about her family, actually. Her mum was in various James Bond films.
Oh, really?
Went out with Victor Lowndes, who ran the Playboy empire. So it's very interesting setup.
Sorry, Victor Lowndes. Sorry,
Victor
I'm going to have
Lowndes,
to.
yeah. She took at the age of 6. She goes to Victor Lowndes' house, which I think she says has 42 bedrooms. Yeah.
Wasn't Victor Lowndes initially married to
Oh, Dylan's wife.
Sarah Dillon?
I wondered that, and I googled it, and I thought the Lowndeses were spelt differently. But I think you may be
Have I
right,
got that
'cause
wrong?
And I immediately thought this was the case. We're going to have to double check this.
Okay,
And we will. But
we
yeah.
will check that. Anyway, go on. So that's
No,
Mickey
it's a
Bereni.
good story. It's also just really interesting because it's the 90s. You know, what a weird old time. You know, the idea that failure in Britpop at that time was considered to be a glorious thing, and success is somehow rather kind of self-serving and gauche and a sellout. So it's a really difficult. Also, it's so sexist, unbelievable. Her stories like going on the Lollapalooza tour are fantastic, where she and the other girl in the group are the only females on stage. And it's all
Oh, wow.
I think it's fantastic. And then we're going to talk to Martin Ware, which I think is a great book. I didn't have a chance to look at it yet. Martin Ware's memoir, amazing. And this is a guy who's still pretty raw about the moment in whenever it would have been, 1980, I suppose, when he's called in by Bob Last and Phil Oakey. Phil Oakey, his dear old mate from school. And he's told that he's out of the group, that they want him out of the band. And they're just about to, the Human League are all ready to take off. And they're there on the launch pad, and he's booted out of the band, and just how miserably upset he is about this. And I don't think he's made a full recovery. But, in fact, he may well have written this book to point out that, actually, he did phenomenally well. Amazing chapter about him producing Terence Trent D'Arby. Fantastic.
Alex Gold.
Yeah.
I'll put you on the spot here. Have you ever been kicked out of a band?
No.
Because you're
I don't
too
wanna
good,
jinx that,
Alex.
by the way.
To go, no.
Sorry?
I don't want to
Like
jinx
saying,
that
have you
by
ever been
saying
dumped
no,
by a girl? No, I don't think I have. Are you sure? Yeah.
So you'd never been kicked out of a group. Okay, I just wondered, because the obvious question is it worse than being dumped by a girl?
Oh
Would it
gosh,
be worse?
I have been dumped.
That's
I've
never
definitely been
happened
dumped.
either.
Oh, yeah, it has.
I wish I could say it's never happened, but it certainly has. And gosh, yeah, it's painful. I have booted people out of groups, and you can see the pain it causes, you know. But sometimes it absolutely has to be done, you know.
Are you a good booter out of members?
I like to think so.
To cushion their fall.
I like to think that I sandwich it in love. You know?
Right. Okay, I bet you
that
do. I
might
bet
not
you
be-
do, Alex. I bet you do. So you
Yeah.
don't leave it to
Sandwiched
the
in
you,
Love, the
you
third
don't
album.
you don't do what fearless John Lennon did when he wanted to get rid of Pete Best, which is say to Brian Epstein,
get someone else to
you
do it.
get rid of him.
No, you have a personal sit down, because that's the way you do things, isn't it? Really, but I think that, you know, especially when you're younger, being in the band is the closest thing you can have to actually being in love, because
Yeah.
they're very similar
that's-
things to teenagers.
you're
That's a
gang, your mates.
that's very well put point.
It is,
actually.
it is.
Which I'm sure still applies to the likes of Martin
Yeah,
Ware.
yeah.
Well, just about any
Oh, it's
successful
still
musician.
raw for him.
They-
It really
yeah,
is. It'd be interesting to talk to him about it, actually.
yeah.
I mean, he's done his best to get over it, but he's collapsed. And of course, you know, and it's fantastic because what happens then is he's signed to the same record label with Heaven 17, the British Electric Foundation, and there's both signed to Virgin. They're both in the same studios in Sheffield. Human League go there at 10 o'clock in the morning and stop at 10 o'clock at night. They go in at 10 o'clock at night and stop at 10 o'clock in the morning. So they're in the same studio. And he keeps finding tapes of what the Human League are recording, which he thinks is so terrible, it gives them real confidence. And of course, then the Human League put out this record, which is a monumental worldwide success. So, it's brilliant.
You
It's
see,
gripping.
that's so interesting, isn't it?
It is.
If a group if a group splits up, I put it to you, Alex, that no matter what they say in an interview, they all go off and do their individual things. And what each of them is hoping more than anything in the world is that the rest
the
of
one
them
fails.
all die like lice in Russians' beards.
Yeah.
That's what they care about, because, you know, it's like association football. What keeps rock and roll going is spite.
You and I were at the same publishing company, Dave, and our chairman always used to say, it's not about winning, it's about the other person losing horribly.
Really badly.
I know. Oh, dear. The same man, his great expression was always, the floggings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah,
I thought it was quite funny, actually.
And of course, the truest word that Morrissey ever wrote. Now he gets a bit of a bad rap nowadays, but you know, it was that song. We hate it when our friends
become
became
successful. I know.
Particularly when they're northern, that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Doubly true.
Yeah.
You know? So you know, weigh that in the balance when you're
Yeah.
thinking about Morrissey. He said those words. Those words needed saying.
And there's a wax effigy somewhere of Johnny Marr, which Morrissey freshly stabs with knitting needles, I'm sure.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.